It was a quiet evening in the grand mansion of Daniel Harris, a cold and distant millionaire who lived alone with his little son, Oliver. Since his wife's passing, Daniel had buried himself in work, leaving the care of his child entirely to the young maid, Clara. She was gentle, humble, and always smiling despite her tired eyes. Every morning she would greet Oliver with warmth and play with him as if he were her own child. Daniel rarely noticed her, only seeing her as another employee in his luxurious home, until that one evening when everything changed. Daniel came home earlier than usual after a long meeting. As he walked through the hallway, he heard an unusual silence. Normally, he would hear Oliver's laughter echoing from the nursery, but today there was nothing, no laughter, no sound. Concerned, he hurried upstairs and opened the door to his son's room. The sight before him froze his breath. Clara was lying unconscious on the carpet, her hand still clutching a baby bottle, while Oliver stood in his crib, calling her name in his baby voice, confused and scared. "Clara!" Daniel shouted, rushing to her side. He lifted her head gently and noticed how pale she looked. Her skin was clammy, her breathing shallow. "Call an ambulance," he shouted toward the hallway, his voice trembling for the first time in years. As he waited for help, Daniel noticed the faint smell of medicine near her. On the small table beside the crib was an open bottle of cheap pills. His heart sank. What was going on? At the hospital, Daniel waited anxiously while the doctors worked to stabilize her. Hours passed like days. Finally, a doctor approached him and said softly, "She's going to be okay, but she needs rest. Severe exhaustion, malnutrition, and untreated anemia. She's been pushing herself beyond her limits." Daniel frowned. "But why would she do that? She works for me, she could have asked for help." The doctor hesitated before replying, "She's been skipping her meals to send money to her family. She mentioned she's paying for her little sister's medical treatment." Those words struck Daniel like a thunderbolt. For years, he had been surrounded by people who only wanted his money, and yet here was someone silently sacrificing everything, not for herself, but for others. He suddenly realized how little he knew about the people around him, especially the woman who cared for his son more tenderly than he ever had. The next morning, Daniel visited Clara in her hospital room. She looked weak but smiled faintly when she saw him. "I'm so sorry, sir," she whispered. "I didn't mean to worry you or Oliver. I just didn't have the strength anymore." Daniel sat beside her, guilt washing over him. "You've been taking care of my son as if he were your own, while I couldn't even see what you were going through," he said quietly. "Why didn't you tell me about your family?" Clara hesitated, tears forming in her eyes. "Because people like me. Don't get sympathy from people like you, sir. I've seen how the world treats the poor. I didn't want to lose my job." Her words cut deep. For the first time, Daniel saw the walls he had built around his heart, the arrogance, the coldness, the distance. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is a check," he said, placing it gently on the bedside table. "For your sister's treatment, and for you to rest and recover. From now on, you're not just my maid. You're family." Clara's eyes widened as tears rolled down her cheeks. "I can't accept this," she whispered. Daniel smiled softly. "You already have. You saved my son's life every single day when I wasn't there for him. It's time someone saved yours." Weeks later, Clara returned to the mansion, healthier, stronger, and no longer just an employee. Oliver ran into her arms the moment she stepped inside, laughing joyfully. Daniel watched from the doorway, his heart swelling with gratitude. He began spending more time at home, playing with his son, sharing meals with Clara, and slowly learning the meaning of compassion again. One evening, as the sun set over the mansion, Daniel looked at Clara and said, "You changed everything in this house. You taught me what real kindness means." Clara smiled humbly. "Maybe you just needed someone to remind you that love doesn't come from wealth, sir, it comes from care." From that day on, Daniel was no longer the lonely millionaire. He was a father who had rediscovered love, and a man who learned that true richness isn't measured in money but in the hearts you touch.